Hello. I need to get a second mouse. Right. Hello everybody. Hopefully the mic is working this time. Just watching the feed. Oh good, excellent. It took a while to get it all sorted, but it appears to be working, so there's that at least. Let me just check the... Yes, there we go. Right, so the feed is working properly. Sorry, the laptop is just that little bit further away. I need to get a second mouse so I don't have to keep leaning forward. Yes, that is a HMS hood. Right, so what we're going to do, as the description says, is for the first 30 minutes or so, I'm going to continue on with a question that was raised in the last live stream, which I didn't get the chance to answer because, well, we ran out of time and it was such a large question, which was basically what would I have done differently at Jutland? Off to hunt a large shark. Now, I have thought of that because I have a series of increasingly inappropriate headgear. So you see, you could have me delivering the entire lecture in a gigantic top hat, such as this one. But yeah, this is just silly because it gradually falls down. My head is not quite this big, so it gradually falls down and down and down, and then it gets silly. So I'm going to put that to one side. But I have a variety of other hats off to one side just in case. Maybe that's for another time when I get my monocle out. Right, so Jutland. The important thing for this first section while we're talking about what we'll do different at Jutland is the setting, because there's a certain amount you can do at Jutland if you just teleport in and take, say, Jellicoe's place. But obviously, when you do that, it makes all sorts of differences. If you're taking Jellicoe's place as he's en route, there's a limited amount you can do, but there's still certainly things you could do. If you take Jellicoe's place a week before, a month before, a year before, obviously the number of changes can butterfly. So given that the question was literally just what would I do at Jutland, I'm going to take that as my own interpretation of the setting, and that is I'm going to take it such that I'm going to take Jellicoe's place, but I'm going to try and, to a degree, minimize the degree of hindsight that I'm using. But obviously it's very difficult to actually do that when you know how the battle went down, so we'll see how that goes. And I'm also going to assume that I can make a few changes to who's in command of which squadron, and we'll see how that goes. So, I mean, the other thing with hindsight, to be perfectly honest, is you don't want to fall into the old trap of assuming that the opponent will act in exactly the same way, even as you radically change everything and cut the ground out from under him. So, yeah, we'll try and take that into account as well. So I'm going to assume that I get command of the Grand Fleet a few months before Jutland. So, as I say, I can make recommendations for squadron command changes, and the first big thing I'm going to do, shocking as it might seem, is yes, Beatty is getting reassigned. I'm not actually going to reassign him outside of the Grand Fleet. For one thing, he's very well politically connected, so to completely chuck him out of the Royal Navy, much as he might deserve it, at the time before Jutland, he hasn't quite managed to screw up enough for me to justify it, and also on top of that, well, it will cause a lot more trouble. It's basically, it's politically, realistically not feasible to get rid of Beatty entirely. What I would do is I would reassign him. And what I'm going to reassign Beatty to is I'm going to reassign him to what historically at Jutland would have been the westernmost battle squadron. So he's going to get command of that battle squadron. That one includes ships like Marlborough and Revenge, and you'll see why that is the case a little bit later. I have a plan for that. Now, who gets command of the battlecruiser fleet? Well, there's a bit of shuffling going around. So the admiral who's in charge of the westernmost battle squadron gets reassigned to Admiral Sturdee's historic command, which is the battle squadron immediately to the west of me in Iron Duke. And then that person who was in charge right next to Jellicoe, who was kept on a very short leash, was Admiral Sturdee. And yes, Admiral Sturdee, I'm going to stick him with the battlecruiser fleet. Now, I know some people have some rather interesting opinions on Sturdee, and yes, he was a bit of a maverick, and yes, he did have quite a high opinion of himself, as I said in a recent dry dock. But when you look at the way he actually conducted himself in combat, when you look at the Falklands, he has a much, much better idea about how to handle battle cruisers, at least in my estimation, than Beatty does. He's someone who, if you look at the Falkland Islands engagement, he takes his battle cruisers in, he sees the Germans, he starts shooting at the Germans. When the Germans start shooting back and Sturdee goes, right, I have a range advantage, he doesn't try and press in closer, he just goes, I'm going to stand over here where you can't really hurt me, and I'm just going to keep blasting away at you, which is exactly how you want to be using the battle cruisers at Jutland, because they have that range advantage. Also, Sturdee's flag officer and signals officer are actually relatively decent at their job, so they're not going to lose the 5th Battle Squadron randomly, which probably helps. So those are my command reassignments, relatively minimal, and yes, that is Iron Brew. And then off we go into battle. And for those of you who asked, yes, I will be briefly looking at the German side as well. Albeit that my first instinct to what would I do differently at Jutland if I was on the German side is pretty much what Scheer said right from the start in his memoirs, which is that if he'd known he was going to be fighting Jutland, he would never have gone out. But I'll try and go a little bit more detailed than that later on. So we're going out to Jutland. Sturdee's in command of the battle cruiser fleet. It's not big enough for him to try his split tactics. And so we end up, approximately speaking, with the run to the south developing. Now, the important thing with this is that now, because Sturdee is almost certainly going to have made sure 5th Battle Squadron is staying with him because he really likes his firepower and he has a good flag officer, that means that instead of the run to the south being a 6 versus 5 with an inexperienced Tiger, it's going to be a 10 versus 5, which is not the situation that shall we say Hipper particularly wants. Is exactly the situation 5th Battle Squadron wants. So the run to the south is going to go probably a fair bit worse for Hipper, with the one sole caveat that Hipper can ramp up the speed and motor on away if he really, really feels he has to, because remember, although Lion, Tiger, Princess Royal and Queen Mary can keep up with him, Indefatigable in New Zealand can't really, as long as all of Hipper's battle cruisers are able to keep up at maximum speed. And the 5th Battle Squadron, again, they can't keep up completely if everyone's pelting it along at maximum speed. They're close enough that they can keep up with a battle cruiser fleet that is incorporating Invincibles or Indefatigables. But Hipper does have the opportunity to pile on the knots to get away. But at the same time, if that happens, then you end up with the 3 Lions and Tiger shooting at the tail end of